Greetings, viewers. Eric the Car Guy here. Yes, knitted eyeballs. It's April Fool's Day. Figured I'd throw something in there for you. And no, my post earlier today with Fixing It Forward was not a April Fool's joke. In fact, you're going to get your first video in that series on Friday. First, I'd like to welcome you to this show and thank you for watching. And what is this show? Well, this is a show where I answer your automotive questions live. And today we don't have a lot of questions. Sorry about that. I guess we're experiencing technical difficulties. I've been having some issues with the internet. I've reset the modem, done a bunch of stuff. So hopefully we'll be able to get through this. So welcome back and thanks for sticking around. All right, now just do your thing. And I'm talking to the computer here. All right, Samson Vang. Hello, Eric. I haven't seen any of your videos about a flashing check engine light. What's the cause and what do we do to go about with it continuing to flash? Well, I have a 1999 Honda CR-V currently with a check engine light flashing. Once I get to a certain speed, it stops flashing but stays on. My last code pull was misfiring on all 4 cylinders. I've done a complete change of plugs, wires, cap, and rotor, but plus reset the ECU, but nothing's changed. Okay, you're correct. I don't have a video specifically addressing the flashing check engine light. If you do have a flashing check engine light, that means the computer has detected something that could cause damage to the engine, such as a misfire. And I'm not surprised that you had those misfire codes to go along with that. Now, you did address the ignition components, which are a really good place to start. However, particularly with Hondas of this vintage, you need to make sure you use some good quality parts, because I have seen issues with some brand new parts from some aftermarket companies that didn't work out so well. NGKs are at the top of my list as far as the plugs to use. That does work well as well. I like NGK wires. Also, I like Beck Arnley ignition parts as far as cap and rotor. As for if you want to go cheaper, OE is always best, but let's face it, it's really super expensive, and why invest that kind of money in a 99? That being said, ignition misfires are not the only thing that can cause an issue like this. Another thing could be a mechanical issue. I believe you have the, what do they call that? The B-Series, the B-Series engine in that vehicle. And there's a couple of things with the B-Series that I've seen that can cause misfires. One of the things is a loose timing belt. A loose timing belt, with that being a dual overhead cam engine, can cause the cams to not move in a smooth rotation. I call it chunking. So instead of them smoothly rotating around, what happens is with a loose timing belt with that dual overhead cam, every time a cam lobe comes in contact with a rocker arm and the spring pressure from that valve springs pushing back on that cam lobe, it sort of gives it a not smooth effect. So that slack allows it to do this as it's spinning. The distributor is directly connected to that camshaft, so the distributor is also doing this very same thing. In addition, those valves are adjustable. If those valves are not adjusted correctly or out of adjustment, I've also seen that cause misfires. In addition, if you have a vacuum leak, it can also cause a misfire. I don't often find fuel delivery problems, but it cannot be ruled out. So in other words, last on my list would be checking fuel pressure and checking for a fuel delivery issue, but I suspect you'll find your issue being a mechanical issue, such as, like I said, with a timing belt being loose, possibly misadjusted valves, or I've actually seen burned valves, some other mechanical issue, and that you can find with a compression test, or better yet, you could really find it with a leak down test. So if you perform a leak down test, it can tell you whether or not you've got or it tells you where it's leaking. So first of all, you can do a compression test to find out, oh, okay, I've got really low compression on this particular cylinder. Then to look further, a leak down test will give you an indication of whether or not that's coming out of an exhaust valve, an intake valve. And many times I see, like misadjusted valves that I talked about, I see the exhaust valves burn up and crack and cause a misfire similar to what you have. All right, we've spent a lot of time on that, but I will post a link in the description, and this is for all the rest of you. I will post a link in the description to additional information, including a video about doing a leak down test and compression test. But give me a couple minutes to get that taken care of after we're done with the show. We have Parapem Fansman. Hey, how you doing, man? Hello, Eric, and thank you very much for the inspiration and clearly communicated information you put out. I truly appreciate it. Thank you very much for that. Anyway, I have a 2000 Toyota Hasey, I've never heard of that, Hasey 2 diesel van. The problem is it doesn't glow at all. The glow lamp on the dashboard doesn't come on either. I checked the fuses and also the glow plug relay, no problem there. So now I'm wanting to get my hands on a wiring diagram so I can try to solve the problem. Just wonder if you had any pointers, experience to share. All the best, Gene. Okay, don't have a lot of experience with diesels, hoping to get more, but you're right. The glow plugs are critical as far as getting it to start on a cold day. So if the light's not coming on, I'm thinking that, well, obviously current isn't flowing. You say you check the relay. A lot of times what I do in these situations when I don't have a wiring diagram, and in fact, I recently had to go through this on that minivan that you'll see in upcoming videos. I check the fuses and see if they're good. But if in this case, I couldn't find a fuse. So what I did was I started at the load of the circuit. In other words, I would go to the glow plugs themselves, unplug them, and check to see if there's voltage going to them. I suspect you don't have it. But then the next place I go is the relay. And I just keep trying to follow it back. A wiring diagram, just like you pointed out, is your best friend in a situation because it tells you what wires to check. But when I'm faced with a situation where I don't have a wiring diagram and I'm trying to trace something electrical down, I just start at the load normally, whether like a motor, window motor, or something like that, and work my way back. That usually yields some results. In your particular situation, I've never even seen one of those vans, so I really couldn't say. I wish I could offer more information, but I think you're on the right track as far as tracking things down electrically speaking. Once again, I'll post a link in the description to an article I wrote on electrical diagnosis that you might find helpful. But it does involve getting your hands on a wiring diagram to help you. So I wish you the best of luck with that. Stephen Kaiser, 2003 Jeep Grand Cherokee 6-cylinder. I just can't get to the neutral safety switch. Any suggestions? Socket won't fit, and 27 millimeter box wrench is too long. Okay, how about try this? I know it's on the transmission there, and it can be inaccessible in that area. It's particularly if you have four-wheel drive and maybe you got a drive shaft in the way. I don't remember whether the drive shaft's in the way or not. Anyway, what I would suggest in this situation is maybe unbolt the, well, first support the transmission with a jack stand or actually a floor jack and a wood block. Then undo the brace that holds the transmission in place and just lower it down a little bit. That might give you just enough access to get up in there to get to that switch. That might be what I would do. If you can't get to it, make room. Start taking parts off until you can. I've done it more than once. It's just kind of the nature of the game. If it's in your way, remove it. it's nice to have a special tool that can sneak on in there and get you what you need, but sometimes you just got to move stuff around. And in your case, I would drop the transmission down a bit, and that might give you the access you need. So good luck with that. Tim Hengst. Hello, Eric. I have a 1999 Jeep Grand Cherokee Sport. Lots of Jeeps today. Lots of Jeep Grand Cherokees at that. A model XJ that I think is the epitome of reliable POS. Just look at how many are still on the road. Well, how funny is that based on our last question? Anyway, mine has 122,000 miles currently, and the body is holding up pretty well despite the many Michigan winters it has seen. No major issues other than no AC. Do you have any specific tips regarding maintaining this vehicle so that it lasts 200,000 miles or longer? I have never had a vehicle this old before, much less one that is a 4x4. Thank you. With most vehicles, maintenance is like your best friend. You can't really do much about the winters, and that's an excellent winter vehicle, so you kind of want to drive it in the winter. But as far as tips to take care of it, I can't stress enough how maintaining a vehicle is, getting the fluids changed on a regular basis, keeping up on your battery. And as far as those winters go, you can help it a little bit by, sometimes I've seen car washes that actually have sprayers that spray upwards to clean the undercarriage, but you can sometimes get up underneath there with a hose, and that's sometimes helpful. But it sounds to me like you're already on the path to getting to know your vehicle and spending time with it. So doing those maintenances and during those maintenances, you'll get a chance to further that intimacy, if you will. And you can keep an eye on a leak that might just be seeping now, that might get worse, or might not get any worse. That just might be something that's normal. Taking care of the reliable POS, as it will, is pretty much having that connection and trying to spot those problems before they become real issues down the road. And the best way to do that is to put your eyes on it. And on a regular basis, like every 3 months or so, you check the brakes or things like that. Every, I would say, 30,000 miles ish. Go over it. Maybe take the brakes apart, clean them up, and lubricate everything. Make sure those are all working, and check your differential fluids. That's something that often gets overlooked on four-wheel drive vehicles, is the differential fluid. Sometimes it's a real pain to change because you have to remove the cover from the differential in order to drain the fluid out. Then you have to scrape the gasket surface on both sides, and put a new gasket in or goo in there, depending upon the type that you have. But once you do change it, differential fluid lasts a pretty long stinking time. But that goes a long way to help those seals inside of those housings, because the older the oil gets, the less its ability to keep up with the demands, and goes through heat cycles, all this stuff. So that's why I say maintenance is a really good way to keep your vehicle lasting as long as possible. And with a Jeep like that, there's plenty of Jeeps out there. There's plenty of Jeep owners. They might know specifics on your particular vehicle, so maybe frequent some forums that are specific to Jeep Cherokees of your vintage. And somebody might say, hey, we found a pattern problem with this. It's something you should watch out for. They might even have some tips on what to do about the AC. So that's what I would do. Maintenance, and look around for the internet is also a really good source. Look around for things that might be potential pattern problems with the vehicle and deal with those ahead of time. All right, Brandon F. Hey, Eric, thanks for taking our questions. 2005 Toyota Corolla LE 1.8. The key was left in the ignition in the on position for several hours, and currently I have no crank, no start. Thanks again. I suspect, quite simply, that your battery has run down. With the key in the on position, stuff is on. It draws power from the battery. The battery only has so much in it, and it probably got run down. Recently did a video about battery maintenance, and one of the things I recommended with a completely dead battery is that you put it on a slow charge to bring it slowly back to life, as opposed to charging it up quickly, or worse yet, trying to charge it with the vehicle after you jump start it, because that can overwork your alternator and possibly cause a problem with that down the road. So to avoid that, charge it up slowly, and that's what I would recommend. And then see if you've still got an issue. Also, check and clean the connections. I'll post a link to that battery video and put that out there. Now, normally I would not answer a question like this because I try to keep it automotive. But Duncan Webster, have you thought about auditioning to replace Jeremy Clarkson on Top Gear? There is no replacement for Jeremy Clarkson. Although, I wouldn't mind his money, but I don't see a replacement for him. He is unique in and of himself, but hey, he's got to do something about his attitude. All right, Ofway 12991. I don't feel bad about sort of mispronouncing that. It's a strange thing. Can you tell me what some of the causes of high idle would be on an 85 small block Chevy? The idle screw on the carb has been backed completely off, and after it warms up, it's still running high. It diesels when I try to shut it off and park in neutral. I'm not surprised about the diesel complaint after you shut it off, because anything with a high idle with a carbureted vehicle, that often happens. Just because of the nature of a carburetor and how it draws fuel into the system based on the air coming in. So if there's more air, there's always more fuel. If there's a little fuel after you shut off, it's still going high. You've backed the idle screw all the way off, so there's something else holding it open. Now, 85 small block Chevy, maybe guessing, throwing it out there, got a quadrajet on it. That information would have been also helpful. What I have seen on quadrajets sometimes is the screws or the attachments of the butterflies sometimes get loose and they sort of wedge in the bore and can cause a high idle. So I might look there. Also, another thing on quadrajets is the throttle shaft that goes through. I've seen that wear out and cause vacuum leaks. So you might want to check there. So, I mean, especially if you've got a high idle with a carbureted vehicle, check for vacuum leaks. Vacuum leaks mess all kinds of things up. But first, make sure your throttle plate is all the way closed. And that's why I mentioned the mechanical issue that could crop up if those little throttle plates are sort of sliding around the shaft or not in there properly. They could wedge inside the bore, holding it open a little bit. So just reach down to the throttle linkage and try to physically force it in the direction of being closed. If you notice at that point that the idle changes and gets lower, then you might be on the right track of something that's causing that to stay open. What you might also have on there is solenoid actuated idle step motor type of thing that is there for when the air conditioning is turned on. It's just like now we have idle control valves to do this, but before that on carburetors, they used to have electrical solenoids that would sometimes, just hit the throttle up a little bit so that when it came down to idle, it would stall. Also, they had those for other things. I mean, they came up with a myriad of solutions and emissions and things. I'm actually kind of glad carburetors have gone away. I liked working with carburetors, but they with fuel injection and electronics, it's almost a world of absolutes. And plus, they give you little hints. So check engine light comes on and gives you a hint as far as what the problem is. But the old carbureted systems, yeah, we had some check engine light ability, barely, if you could call it that. But there's also the possibility of mechanical issues, such as the two that I mentioned with vacuum leaks or the throttle plates or something like that. So that's another layer of challenge for you. But check for vacuum leaks and check for mechanical issues with that. So see if there's something else that might be holding that throttle plate open. I hope that's helpful to you, man. And good luck. Daniel Eel. I feel like Jimmy Fallon. Yo, I'm sorry. I'm not making fun of you. I'm just making fun of myself and my inability to read sometimes. Hi, Eric. I have a 2003 Jeep Liberty 2.5 CRD. Sometimes first thing in the morning, it takes a few seconds to start. Only had it 2 weeks. I replaced all 4 glow plugs, and it's better, but still not great. I have read in a few places about air getting into the fuel system. Do you have any experience with this? Thanks, Daniel in Scotland, UK. I love my European viewers. I really do. But you have vehicles that we don't have here. So it's difficult for me to say other than, covering general things. It was a good start, perhaps by replacing the glow plugs, but it hasn't been my experience that glow plugs will go bad across the board. Similar to the other question that was asked earlier, I probably should have mentioned that if you had power to the glow plugs, but the glow plug light and everything wasn't coming on, to check those glow plugs to see if they were good. But in your case, you've eliminated that by replacing them. But with diesels, yes, you're absolutely correct. Fuel pressure is everything. I cannot stress that enough. Fuel pressure is everything. So if the fuel pressure is off, a little bit low for any reason, such as maybe air in the system, then yes, it will take a little bit longer to start up. As far as how that air gets in there, wish I could say, because I really am not familiar with that system and how are the areas that you might get air into that fuel system. So and there's probably a couple of fuel pumps in play. I wish I could give you more information on that, and I apologize that I don't have it for you. Once again, you might check some forums. Check my forum, in fact. There are a couple people there that do diesel stuff that may be helpful for you. Once again, there's other people watching, but not so much asking questions. All right, Alistair Haddon. When you started working for yourself, what was the most effective way to grow your business and your amount of customers? Really quickly, my business is YouTube, and it's not so much auto repair, it's making auto repair videos. And that is a completely different business model than running a repair shop. Two very different things. And I set out to do that for me because I wanted to change my occupation. So that's what I do now. We'll talk more about that at another time, but I really want to concentrate on people's automotive questions. And the only reason I answered that is because we're light on questions today. Yeah, we still got time now. All right, John MCL, I'm working on my car. I need to change my coolant. What's the best way to clean old coolant out and flush the system? I'm not really an advocate of flushing cooling systems unless there's an issue. So if you've got sediment in the system caused by corrosion or bad coolant or a mixture of coolant, there's some reason to flush the system out. And that would be, some indication that that coolant is contaminated, bad. That's when I flush the system out. My favorite method is a professional flushing machine, which I'm pretty sure you don't have access to. The things where you tee with the garden hose, okay, it'll work. Not my favorite way of doing it because I've seen a lot of leaks in those tees. So you kind of have to take that with a grain of salt. My preferred method is the regular drain and refill. So in other words, drain out the coolant on a somewhat regular basis, just out of the radiator. You're not going to get it all, I know. There's still going to be some in the engine block. However, doing that on a regular basis means that you're going to cycle enough of it through to where it's not going to be an issue. And it's less labor intensive, and to me, it's just easier to do a drain and refill over a quote unquote flush. If you want to do a flush, hey, go for it. And if you feel necessary to do a flush, absolutely do it. But it's not my favorite method of changing coolant. Jacob Simmons, hey Eric, I have a 2004 Dakota V6. I'm not too sure what's going on, but I keep burning out blinker bulbs on the passenger side, both front and rear. I might get lucky if I go 3 weeks without buying more. I'm not sure if I have a short somewhere. What should be my first actions in finding this issue? Number one, make sure you're using some decent bulbs. I've seen some cheap bulbs out there that really aren't worth anything, that you might as well just throw your money away. But the next thing, it's a Dodge Dakota. So I'm thinking maybe you got a connection for a trailer in the back. I find a lot of times problems with turn signals, reverse lights, all that kind of stuff. And you have, especially if you're in an area where there's lots of rust, that type of thing, that sometimes corrosion on those terminals, or an issue with there, sometimes the wire hangs down and maybe gets caught on something or damaged in some way, and that causes issues. That's a good place to look. Also, the sockets. If the sockets themselves are all rusty and crusty on the inside, that's going to cause increased resistance. And that increased resistance can create heat. That heat can help kill the bulb. I mean, I know the bulbs are tungsten, they're going to create heat anyway, but any corrosion there at that connection, not so good. So maybe a bit of contact cleaner, something like that in there to, clean things up to make sure you have a good connection. Outside of that, voltage drop maybe, but I'm not sure what that could tell you if it clue you into if you're having a short somewhere. For sure, if there's increased resistance, a voltage drop test would definitely give you that, but I'm trying to figure out where you would look. But I would definitely look if you have, like I say, a trailer hookup. Look there. I've often cured a lot of problems with turn signals and indicators by going there. Leanne. Hey, Leanne, is Leanne Ezra maybe? Power probe question. Today I was using a power probe on my SC2. Yeah, it is you, Leanne. How are you? I came across a couple of fuses, i.e. wiper radio, that read 0 on the indicator, lights up green on both sides of the fuse. All other fuses read 12.6 and the indicator lights red on both sides. Does the negative and the positive indicate ground side switch circuit or a power side switch circuit respectively? Not necessarily. Not all circuits are active, even with the key on. And the fuses, there may only be one instance where that fuse is active. When the fuse is inactive, you'll see ground on both sides. So it's perfectly normal to see that. It's not going to tell you whether something is ground side switched or power side switched necessarily. In fact, I did a video with Scanner Danner about that very thing and found as far as how to determine that. But all that is the fact that that fuse does not have power going through it at that time. At some other point in time when that circuit is active, yes, there will likely be power going through it, and you'll see power on both sides. But when you're going through a fuse box, don't expect every fuse to give you a power reading, because they won't. It'll be some will, some won't. Trevor Frymere, hey Eric, I've been working on my friend's 2005 Kia Sportage 5 AT. Originally wouldn't start. All he heard was a click. I checked the solenoid wire to the starter and had 12 volts. So I assumed bad starter and replaced it. He drove it for 2 days, and then all of a sudden it won't start again. I pulled the wiring diagram to track down what could be causing it, but every time I go to work on it, it starts. Also, the battery is brand new and shows 12.6 volts. How do you hunt down an intermittent electrical issue like this if the car is starting when you go to check stuff? Thank you for everything you do. You're the reason I can offer people help with their car issues. That's really cool. That's like, those comments make my day, my week, my month, my year. Okay, intermittent electrical problems, hate them. I think we all hate them, because it's really hard to say, hey, that's bad when it's not acting up. In fact, that's worst case scenario. So unfortunately, you kind of have to wait until it happens. I'm not familiar with that model and any of its quote unquote common problems, but perhaps an ignition switch problem, or maybe a starter relay problem, is not allowing that power to go when it's acting weird. You said you checked the solenoid to see if there was something going down to it, and you found it. So you found power going to the solenoid to tell it to turn on. I'm assuming that's when it wasn't working. I'm not sure, but you just replaced the starter just for the heck of it. And it sounds like the battery was also recently replaced. Just for the heck of it, go through, check the connections. I can't stress enough how battery connections, in particular when it comes to the starter, if there's a loose connection there, that's just not going to let the amps flow through that circuit. And you need all the amps. In fact, that's why the cables are so big coming out of the battery. It's for the starter. The rest of the circuits and everything, they don't use nearly the amperage that the starter does, because that's a big heavy load turning that engine over. In that case, check the connections. Outside of that, I'm not really sure where to steer you, but keep checking, and hopefully the problem will rear its ugly head and give you some indication as far as what it is. But it sounds like you're on the right track. It sounds like you're thinking about it. You're not just saying, hey, let's throw another part at it. And I like that. I like that approach. That's a smart approach. So good on you for that. Dennis Jensen, hey Eric, I've got an 05 Nissan Sentra, replaced the brake rotors and pads about 2 years ago. Recently, there has been a grinding noise coming from the right front wheel, and stopping power seems uneven. I have a couple of questions. What may have caused this, and if I replace the rotor in question, which seems to be the problem, should I also replace the driver's side rotor to prevent uneven wear? Thanks. Rotors don't matter. The brake system doesn't really know how thick the rotors are. What could be coming into play here is the calipers, or maybe there's a problem with the caliper, or the caliper slides. So the caliper is not moving as it should, or staying applied, something of that nature. I have a couple of videos on how to do a diagnosis on that, how to service those slide pins and things that may be sticking or hanging up on a caliper that may be helpful, useful to you. So as far as stopping power being uneven, it sounds to me like a caliper or something is sticking. It could also be a brake hose problem. That's maybe they sort of work like sometimes brake hoses go bad. They kind of work like a check valve, so they may keep pressure applied to a caliper. And the way to find that is to hit the brake pedal a number of times, like really fast, like this, and then go out and crack the bleeder valve. And if there's pressure that comes out, it could very well be a problem with a brake hose. And this is after you've checked everything else. I would leave that at the bottom. I would check out, make sure the caliper slides work, make sure the caliper pistons push in. Crack the bleeder valve when you do that to prevent damage to the master cylinder. But I would check calipers and caliper slides first. If you don't find an issue there, check the brake hoses and that test that I just mentioned. And where are we? Uh, John Durham, hey Eric, is it possible to have a battery with too many cranking amps? Not really, because the circuit is really only going to use what the load dictates. So that the load is going to dictate the amp flow. So you can't really have one with too many cold cranking amps, but it's going to get more expensive, and why would you? So, man. All right. Let's see. Oh, now the questions are coming in. Now you're watching. I was thinking I had all this time, but the questions are all coming in during the show. All right. Well, we'll grab a couple random ones here that have just been posted. And thanks for joining us, by the way. Let's see. We'll start here. All right. Sharon Kerr. Hey, Eric. Love the page show. Had a question of 1992 Accord EX that has just failed inspections for emissions. At idle, hydrocarbons are way high, 4,000 or so. That is high. But at fast idle, it's unbelievably clean. Any thoughts? I've done ignition timing and properly flushed the coolant as per procedure. Engine timing is spot on. Thanks. All right. Hydrocarbons that are high at idle, like really super high at idle, and then when it runs, it's good. So that means I think you're really stinking rich to start with, and then when you open the throttle, you're adding enough air to go with that rich mixture that you have. So what would cause it to be that rich to start with? I'm not sure. I need more information. And unfortunately with a 92, it's not like you can go in there and look at like the data and everything like that. That's not as easy. Pretty much all you get is a flashing check engine light. Speaking of check engine light, do you have a check engine light? That's the first question I have, because that's a good clue. Those older ones, 92s, those older O2 sensors, they can get pretty bad and never set a light. So you might want to look to the operation of the O2 sensor. I've seen O2 sensors just sort of flatline, but the computer doesn't see it. Those older computers were kind of like, yeah, all right, whatever. and it got to a point with single wire O2 sensors where we would practically replace them during a service sometimes. And the car would run great afterwards, just because it brought the mixture up to speed. So my first thought is look to those O2 sensors, or O2 sensor in that case. I think on a 92 you just have one. So that's where I would go there. Yeah, I answered a couple of other questions earlier that weren't automotive related, so I'll grab a couple of these new ones. We got Aristo Ferrer, apologies. Drive a Honda Civic 99 with a manual transmission, 193,000 miles. I was wondering, should I flush transmission fluid? I've never changed it. And put at least 40,000 miles on the car. Car is a little shaky with first gear acceleration. Thanks for response. As far as your acceleration, I don't necessarily think that that's a transmission problem. Shaking under load, a lot of times is ignition related. So I might look to your ignition system. I spoke earlier in this video about quality ignition parts go a long way towards making things run properly. As far as the transmission fluid, you don't need to flush it. You just need to change it, and I'm going to guess that you have an automatic. Oh, you have a manual transmission. Sorry, you did mention that. I've done a video on changing manual transmission fluid on Hondas, and it'll walk you through the process. You're going to need 3 quarts of Honda manual ATF or GM Synchromesh to do that. Don't use anything else. Don't use motor oil. Don't. Just use the Honda fluid. It'll be well worth it. I know it's an older car. I know this stuff is expensive, but if you want it to work right, use the Honda fluid, and you'll be good. All right. I got Kennedy LaCrue. He wants to know, where can I find an OBD2 reader for a pre-96 Ford? In my shop. Somebody gave me one. Actually had a viewer send me one of those things. I don't know if there's a procedure where you can jump wires or things like that, but one of those code readers helps. So come on out to the shop. We'll get you fixed up. All right. One more. Jake Montgomery. Hey, Eric, I have a 1995 Honda Civic EX. Whenever I go over bumps, I hear a pop that sounds like it's coming from the left front. Could this be a U-joint issue? Where should I look first? I love your videos, and thank you for everything you do. Thank you. I appreciate the comment. All right, first of all, no U-joints on that vehicle. They're called CV joints. U-joints are on drive shafts. They're basically square analog. Consider them analog. CV joints are a little more complex. They're used to not only well, they don't change the effective length, but they turn as well as drive. so that they allow the front wheels to turn all over the place. So CV joints instead of U joints, but I know what you're saying. But if you hear a single pop when you're turning, that is likely something else. I would be looking to perhaps maybe broken coil springs. I've seen that cause a pop. Sometimes stabilizer bars, if the links are bad, and if they break entirely, it'll sort of slap around on the suspension system, and you'll be able to spot those fairly easily. But as far as CV joints, it's when you turn the wheel in one direction and you're turning. And anytime you have that, so if you're turning left, it's the right CV joint. If you're turning right, it's the left CV joint. And that's not a pop so much as a click, 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 click as you're making that turn. So that's usually a good indication. Also, a visual inspection might reveal a broken CV boot. If you have a broken CV boot and the grease starts to leak out, that's a pretty good bet that that's the bad one. Anyway, I'm going to close this one out. I think we've covered it, and sorry for doing those out of bounds type questions, but hey, I thought I had less questions than I did. But thank you for watching. Thank you for asking your questions. Once again, YouTube questions will not be answered. Apologies. Thanks to all the people that posted to the Google Plus page, which is where I will answer those questions. Next show is April 15th. I will post additional information down in the description, furthering some of the things that I talked about in this video. There's always EricTheCarGuy.com if you have automotive questions that I did not get to today. It's there all the time, 365 days a year, 7 days a week, yeah, and 24 hours a day, unless we're down for maintenance. But that being said, there's a lot of useful information that I've tried to cram into that website to help those people looking for automotive help, because that's what I do. Anyway, going to close this one out with what I usually say, which is the be safe, have fun, stay dirty. I will see you next time. 2 weeks. Tax day.